Thank you. I'm Steve Boss. I'm from the Metropolitan Milwaukee Association of Commerce, and I first want to welcome all of you here this afternoon. Thanks for coming. Here at the Chamber, we try and create an atmosphere where we can have dialogue about the issues that are important to you individually and also to our region from an economic perspective. And really the subject area where we have the opportunity to discuss today is right in the wheelhouse of those sort of issues. Transportation is something that, as you all know, affects your own personal convenience. It also affects the vitality of our regional economy. And we're at a very important point in the discussion of transportation here in Wisconsin, from a funding perspective, from a priorities perspective. And if any of you think that you have a hard job, you should try and be Secretary Gottlieb, because the Department of Transportation and the Transportation Secretary hears from all of the state all of the time about why don't I have more money for transit, why aren't my highways better, why aren't my roads better. And then if the Department of Transportation suggests making some improvements, there are no magic beans. Those things cost money, and everybody calls them up and says, why are you suggesting taking any more money for me to fund all these things that I asked you to have? And so it's a tough job. It's a tough balancing act. It really we appreciate at MMAC the work that Secretary Gottlieb has done, taking a thorough look at the challenges facing transportation infrastructure in this state. And when I say transportation, and when we talk about it in the context of the Secretary and the Department, I mean transportation writ large. I mean, if it rolls, if it floats, if it flies, if it's a bus, if it's transit, if it's roads, if it's trains, it's all in his bailiwick, and he gets all the complaints, and the governor gets all the credit when things work. So, which is the way it's supposed to be, I guess. But we're really pleased to have Mark here. We're also really pleased to have all of you. We got a great diverse group here, and I think we're going to have a diversity of perspectives on the transportation issue. We have people in all sorts of different sectors here, so I hope that while the Secretary is making his presentation, you're thinking of questions that you can ask relevant to him and the priorities and the plans of his department. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce my friend who I met in the legislature a long time ago when we were both working there, and he moved on to bigger and better things, and I moved here. So Secretary Gottlieb.
Thanks very much, Steve. And in fact, I think Steve has pretty well stated the case. So, are there any questions? So I'm joined here today. I just want to mention a couple of our fine staff, or leaders at our department. Mike Berg is our deputy secretary, and Brett Wallace is the guy that has the harder job than I have, actually, in the sense that he runs our Southeast Region office, which is the 7 counties of southeastern Wisconsin here, and Brett does a great job. And if there are issues that come up this morning and we're talking about questions that are specific to project needs and so forth in southeastern Wisconsin, those are the ones that I may very possibly punt off to Brett to answer for me. Obviously, as Steve said, this is a very pivotal time for transportation in our state. Let's just back up a couple of years. The legislature took a look at this issue back in the 2011 budget and really came to a conclusion that as some of the issues that we all know are out there, we rely largely on fuel taxes and registration fees to finance our transportation system. People are driving more fuel-efficient vehicles or driving alternative fuel vehicles. In the recession, vehicle miles traveled did not grow at the rate that it had been growing previously. It's starting to come back now somewhat. But so we faced some challenges going forward. We knew that we had needs, and I'll talk a little bit about those in a couple minutes. So the legislature, I think, recognized that there was an issue here that we really ought to come to grips with as a state. So they formed back in 2011 a 10-member citizen commission called the Transportation Finance and Policy Commission. 10 citizen members, some appointed by the governor, some appointed by the legislative leaders, so appointed by Democrats and Republicans. That group went off for 15 months, came back and made a unanimous recommendation to the governor and the legislature that was very wide-ranging, but for all intents and purposes, it boils down to a recommendation that in order for us to continue to have a safe and efficient transportation system in our state, we would need to raise about $6.8 billion of new revenue over 10 years. $6.8 billion over 10 years. So an average of about $680 million a year on a state DOT budget of about $3.5 billion for comparison purposes. So they made that recommendation. Now, so fast forward a little bit, it came out in January of 2013, right around the time the budget was being deliberated for the current biennium that we're in. So really not a lot of opportunity for that recommendation to be vetted or thought a lot about or to be included in that budget. But subsequent to that, the governor did ask us, Governor Walker has made investment in infrastructure one of the 5 key themes of his administration. He's very interested in the role that transportation plays in making sure that we have a vibrant economy, that we're able to compete in a global environment for manufacturing, for agriculture, certainly for tourism and everything that's important to Wisconsin's economy. So the governor asked us, as we go into this next biennium that's going to start in July 1st of 2015, can you as a department, start to really take a close look at this issue and bring me a budget, bring me a robust budget request, which of course, as governor, I'm going to take a look at, and I may accept some parts, and I may reject some parts, I may change, obviously, but bring me something that's a comprehensive, long-term solution as the department sees it. So that's essentially what we did. And as a precursor to putting that proposal out there, we had an initiative earlier this spring that was called Transportation Moves Wisconsin. We went out and did 9 town hall meetings all around the state, in every corner of the state, talked to hundreds of people, some of whom I recognize in this room that appeared at some of those, talked to hundreds of people, letting them know, here's what our department does, here's our vision for the future, here's the challenges we face, here's what we're doing to be more performance-oriented and cost-effective and accountable and transparent, and lastly, you tell us what you think. What do we need? Where should we be? So we went all around the state at those 9 town hall meetings, plus I did probably a couple dozen other groups of this size and so forth to talk about these issues. So we used all of that, plus studying what's been going on in other states and the Transportation Moves Wisconsin, and largely relying on the analysis that was done for the Transportation Finance and Policy Commission to put together a budget request that we did submit a few weeks ago, and that I'm going to take some time to walk you through this morning and talk to you a little bit about it. And then we'll take some time to answer whatever questions you might have. So what I want to do is hit on really 3 things. And again, we're talking about a budget. We're sort of transitioning now from talking long range in the way that the commission did to talking about what we have to do to meet our needs in this next biennium, because this is, we have a state that does a biennial budget, so we have to submit a 2-year budget. So what's our transportation fund look like for the next 2 years, and more importantly, almost, what would be the consequences if we don't deal with some of these revenue issues? Talk a little bit about some of the investments that we're proposing to make in this budget. We have made it a priority that what we wanted to submit to the governor was a budget that focused on outcomes, and that we would be able to say, we're asking to raise this revenue, we're asking to make these additional investments in a variety of different areas, and we want to be able to show you that there will be positive outcomes for the state, for our citizens, for our state's economy as a result of making these investments. And finally, I think Steve said there's no magic beans. We were asked to put together a proposal for how this all might be paid for in terms of revenue. So those are the 3 things I want to touch on today. And I'll try to, since we're here at MMAC, to maybe key in a little bit more on some of the issues significant to the region. So I think one of the things we've heard over the last couple weeks since we put the proposal in, and we've heard it from some business groups, we've heard it from some legislators, we've heard it from others, again, prove to me again, or explain to me again why we have a problem, or what the problem is, or what's the magnitude of the situation. So, I think we worked hard over a couple of years to do that, and I don't want to make this a presentation all about just a bunch of numbers and spreadsheets, but it is important for me to sort of give you an idea of where we sort of stand, and again, looking at the biennium that will begin in July 1st of 2015. essentially, when we budget for the state, we look at our cost to continue budget. What will it cost us to continue to do the things that we do, and compare that to the revenues that we're going to take into our transportation fund over the next 2 years. And we've calculated, and I think the Legislative Fiscal Bureau has confirmed the numbers fairly close to this, but again, I think the Fiscal Bureau is going to be certainly taking a look at these numbers, and they are the gold standard, the Fiscal Bureau is, in terms of, especially in the legislators' minds, about, you know, the reality of the state budget. And so we look forward, frankly, to having the Fiscal Bureau take a look at our numbers, and we think that they will be fairly closely verified. But when you look at that on a cost to continue basis, and again, not even thinking about you know, additional needs or things over and above what we're currently doing, we have a base deficit just to continue to do the functions that we're doing right now, and that amounts to about $318 million, again, over the 2-year biennium, okay? We feel like, let's talk about what does that really mean in terms of what we realistically expect us to have to perform on in the next couple years, and how would we adjust that number based on that. And really it comes down primarily to one big adjustment, which you see here as Southeast Freeways. And I'm not going to get into a lot of real detail about how the state budget is put together, but I suffice to say that if you think about these projects like the Zoo Interchange, which are ongoing right now for completion in 2018. We have a long-range plan which Brett and his team have put together to modernize and rehabilitate this whole Southeast Wisconsin freeway system. So that's a long-range plan, but we still only budget on a 2-year basis. And in order to make sure that we were able to keep particularly the Zoo, I-94 North-South, some other projects going in this current biennium that we're in, the state relied on some funding sources that are not in our base budget. They are not repeatable. For example, there was some considerable amount of bonding that was done based on the future sale of state assets. That's one example. And that was how we sort of financed this program. And as a result, those revenues are no longer ongoing. They're not in our base. So we have to make up for that. And talk a little bit about, so why do you have to make up for that? Why don't you just sort of live within what you have? And I think it's important for me to really take a little bit of a detour and answer that question for you. I would liken it to this. When we look at our state highway program, I think this is important to those of you who are, you know, obviously here in the southeast region of the state. I think our highway program, you know, has two significant needs. We have a 12,000-mile system all around our state of state and federal highways, 5,000 bridges. We have an obligation to preserve and maintain that system in a safe and efficient condition, and that is the bulk of what we do, okay? So we're doing that, and we're chugging down that highway. We also have, as I mentioned before a little bit, and I should expand on it, is a freeway system here in the southeast, which is very important to the state's economy, moves a lot of regional and interstate freight and tourists and commuter traffic. It's really it's here in the region, but it's really important to the whole state. That system was really designed mostly in the 1950s, some built in the 1950s, built in the 1960s. We've done a variety of different things over the years to obviously to keep that thing running and to manage it and so forth. But at the end of the day, we are in a position right now where we are in a long-range, long-term plan to basically modernize that system, bring it up to 21st century standards of safety and mobility, and just replace it because it's worn out. Replace it, upgrade the safety, make capacity adjustments where we need to do that, where we need to add capacity, and I know that's been a controversial subject that maybe we can touch on later, but so we have this long-range plan to do that. Started with the Marquette, proceeds now with the Zoo Interchange project. Mitchell Interchange we completed. We're working on I-94 North-South in Kenosha, Racine, and Milwaukee counties. We're working on the Zoo. Again, we're just in the process of completing the environmental studies and going out for public hearing on the segment of I-94 between the Marquette and the Zoo Interchange. But again, this is going to be a long-range, multi-decades process. This is going to last for decades. And we believe the prudent thing to do is to accept that fact, accept that those investments are going to be made, and develop not a one-time budget for doing that, but a base budget going forward that we can rely on having that money. Because again, we plan out for decades, but we only budget on a 2-year cycle. And I think it's really important for us as a department. We take it really seriously that we're going to honor our commitments. And so we've we were working on this zoo interchange project as an example. I use the zoo as an example. We've planned for a 2018 completion. We've made assurances. We've made commitments to Milwaukee Regional Medical Complex, Freighter, Children's Hospital, Ronald McDonald House, UWM Innovation Campus, all the businesses all around there, City of Wauwatosa, City of Milwaukee, all these different stakeholders, and just the traveling public, that there's a pot of gold at the end of this rainbow. This isn't all about disrupting your travel every day. We're going to get to an end point here. And that end point, that commitment that we've made, we want to honor that. Because if we don't have the resources to do that, we're just going to drag these things out. It's going to affect other projects down the road more. It's going to bring more disruption, add additional cost, and really affect development plans of different big developments and so forth around that area. So when we look at the whole thing, we kind of assume, you know what, whether we have the base funding for that or not, which we don't entirely, partially we do, we think it's reasonable to assume that we're going to have to go ahead and do that anyway. We have to keep this plan of modernization of the Southeast Freeway system, which is going to take decades, started with the Marquette, going to continue. We need to keep that on track. It's just critical to this region. And I think what I'm trying to show you here is that what these numbers demonstrate is we just do not have the revenue resources to do that at the same time that we're making sure the rest of that system in the other 65 counties of Wisconsin is preserved and maintained as well. So you add all that on there, we come up to what we sort of refer to, not an official terminology, okay, but sort of the realistic deficit. What do we really need to fill? And so we look at that number of, really close on to $1 billion. And again, people have questioned, well, how does that compare to the $680 million that the commission said and whatever? And these questions largely depend on when you're asking the question. What period of time are you asking the question about, and what assumptions are you making about what you're going to do? So you will see some variation, but nonetheless, I think if you look at the various numbers that have been put out there regarding the needs on our system, they do connect to each other if you understand those differences, and they are easy to relate. Maybe we haven't done, I'll concede, maybe we haven't done the best job in the world of we're mostly a bunch of engineers in our department. Maybe we haven't done the best job of sort of bringing these home to a lay person's ability to understand. But I guess I want to assure you and hope you leave today with the understanding that these needs are real, and they are significant. Oh, pointing the wrong way. Okay. So folks have asked us the question. Well, okay, I have to live in my house and do my business with the revenues that come in from my income, and I have to adjust my spending to that reality of how much money I have. Why don't you just do the same thing? Why don't you basically live within the revenues that you're going to have? Why can't you do that? Well, we certainly could do that if we were directed to do it. Our job as a department, I think, and I think we do a pretty good job of it, is to basically be able to tell our policymakers, whether it's the governor or the legislature, okay, we have some pretty good models about our system condition and what will happen to it in the future, and we can say, you know what, look, if this is the investment you choose to make, you're the elected representatives of the people of our state. If these are the investments you choose to make and the revenues you choose to raise, this is the outcome that's going to happen at the end of the day. So let's just look real quickly at that. So again, I said, realistically, we've got some major projects. I mentioned these ones in Southeast. The same applies to the Hone Bridge, which is ongoing, almost completed. The Stillwater Bridge, which is up across the St. Croix River that we're doing in partnership with Minnesota. These are so far along that, again, for reasons I've stated, we think they ought to stay on their current schedule. So what happens if we leave those alone and we take this reduction, this $974 million deficit, and we close it by cutting our spending, okay, which is certainly a option. And again, there are a million different ways we could do that. Just to give you an example, though, of the magnitude of that, if we didn't want to do any additional general obligation bonding to what we already have in our base, and the legislature has expressed considerable concern about bonding in the past, and we took that entire reduction out of our statewide highway program, that would be a 40% reduction in the money that we're spending on the state highway system. And not only that, it would be that 42% reduction for this 2-year biennium, and if we don't choose to solve the problem in the next biennium, that would compound and compound and compound into the future. So again, that's one example. That would mean significant project delays. It would mean our inability to meet commitments. It would mean that we would start to have cascading condition issues, which I'll talk about in a minute. So Again, one example of how this whole thing could play out if we did not have a revenue package in this budget. And I think that is a future environment that probably most of the businesses and individuals in our state would not be very enthusiastic about. Needless to say, then, we have some other initiatives that I'll talk about in the budget to do maintenance better and better traffic operations and some other things. Those are things that clearly we would never be able to fund if we didn't have some kind of a package. So let me run sort of quickly here through some of the specifics of the investments that we're talking about making. Again, I've talked about a big part of our program is what we call the Southeast Freeways Mega Projects program. We want to put that onto a sustainable base going forward. As you can see, Brett and his team have identified that about $350 million a year ongoing is what it's going to take to modernize this system in a robust way, keep our projects on schedule, start design engineering on the 94 East West project, presuming, of course, that we are able to complete the environmental process in 2015 and have a preferred alternative that's acceptable, and then start to think. These are really long lead time, and a lot of consultants are in this room. I know you know this, but so we're building a project, we're designing another project, and we're thinking about the project after that project. So, and that's how you sort of keep that thing going. And I just want to touch real quick on the Southeast Freeways issue on this question of capacity. Why are you adding capacity on 94 East West? Why are you doing these other things? Because it's a legitimate question. And there have been some folks and some environmental groups out there who said, you know what your problem is, DOT? If you just stopped building all these new highways and you just stopped adding capacity, you wouldn't have a budget problem. You could just fix and take care of what we have and we would all be happy. I wish that were true. I absolutely wish that were true. I mean, but it isn't. And I mean, we try to be a data-driven agency and look at things the way that they are. And let me just share a couple facts with you about this whole expansion versus preservation issue. First and foremost, over 85% of our highway program budget is preservation and maintenance. I will repeat that. Over 85% of our highway program budget is just preserving and maintaining the system that we have. So 15% of it is expanding that system, adding capacity. Now, people have questioned, I mean, I've seen groups question the validity of expansion projects. We have tried very hard, and I think we will stand behind our data to make sure that the investments that we make in expanding the capacity on our system are made in the highest priority areas where those expansions will have the greatest economic benefit. We did a study. We looked at a couple things. We just released a report a few months ago called the Travel Time Reliability and Delay Report. Okay, that identified that there are a number of freeway segments, including the ones that we're studying right now in the Milwaukee area, that have very poor travel time reliability. That if a trip normally takes 30 minutes, that people have to plan 60 minutes to take that trip. Or more in some cases. And so we want to deal with those congestion and reliability issues. On the delay side, I said we studied that a little bit. Just on the interstate freeway corridors in the state alone, just on the interstate corridors, we identified a user cost of delay and congestion of over $225 million a year. That is an actual cost that's being paid by businesses in Wisconsin, being paid by shippers in Wisconsin, being paid by individual commuters in Wisconsin, and we want to address those. So my point to you is, we are spending the overwhelming majority of our money on maintaining the system that we have. But there are targeted investments in capacity expansion that we need to make, that are prudent to make, and that will have extremely high relationship of benefit to cost. And, we've talked about that. We had a meeting earlier this week, as you may know of the Transportation Projects Commission, recommended some other major projects, including I-43 from Silver Spring up to Highway 60 in Ozaukee County. And we were very upfront with the members of that commission about, here's the benefits that you get in relation to the costs. And all of those had significant positive cost-benefit ratios. Again, the public investment that we're making in those capacity expansions is returning much more in benefits to our economy and to our citizens than the investment that we're making. Major highway program is really the capacity expansion projects that we do outside of the Southeast region. And again, we are looking to make sure that we, again, sort of honor our commitments, keep these projects on schedule. The major ones I would mention to you, I-3990, big gateway to Wisconsin from Beloit up to Madison, to the South Beltline in Madison, and then sort of fanning out, if you think about it, all over the state, depending on which way you go, up to the Northwoods, out to La Crosse, up through Eau Claire, whatever. Expanding that from 4 lanes to 6 lanes, again, a lot of that money being used for preservation. But we want to keep that project on schedule. Other projects we have, new Little Lake Butamore Causeway and work up in the Appleton area, a project that I know that if you talk to any business group in the Fox cities, they will tell you has been a priority for them for decades to get that project done. And we got it programmed and we're starting to build it, and we want to keep it on schedule and meet that commitment. Again, though, the core of our highway program is rehabilitation. It's protecting and preserving the asset that we have, making targeted safety improvements and so forth and so on, pavement condition. This chart just really tells you, under our proposal versus a static, no new revenues proposal, over 10 years, what does that mean? We would preserve over 2,000 additional miles of the state highway system over that 10 years. So again, we want to focus on the outcomes that people are going to get from this budget, over 2,000 miles. And again, I think the real takeaway is down here. So it talks about percent of backbone highways. We have a 12,000 mile system. We sort of divide that up. About a little over 10% of it, about 1,500 miles, is what we call the backbone system, which is the interstate, primarily interstate and U.S. highways, interstate system, U.S. 41, and so forth and so on. The ones that we want to keep in the best condition, that move the most freight, that move the most traffic. We will be able to say that in 10 years, 95% of that system will be in fair or better condition after 10 years, whereas if we don't deal with this issue in the way that we're talking about, 14%, I mean, it doesn't sound like a lot, but that means 1 out of every 7 miles of the most heavily traveled highways in the state in poor condition. And this is not something where we're trying to fudge these numbers. I mean, the numbers for the non-backbone system are a lot worse. We would still be prioritizing this part of the system. This is just a slide that we used around and we'll use, I think, again, to talk about, again, focusing on the outcomes of our proposal, how our 6-year highway program looks under a variety of different scenarios. And clearly you can't read the map, but you can just see there's a lot of green and red there, which are projects that we would be able to either advance or add into our program based on additional revenues that would be available. I keep pointing in the wrong direction. Real quickly on maintenance and operations, again, a priority that, frankly, over a decade or so, at least until the last biennium, was a somewhat neglected area because of revenues. So, we want to make sure that we have the resources that we need to maintain our system. Winter maintenance is a big part of it. We use about 500,000 tons of road salt a year on the state highway system. That price has doubled in the last 10 years. So we need to adjust for some of those things and to make sure that people are having a safe experience on our highway system, that the lighting is good, that the pavement marking is good, that we're providing good traveler information through our traffic operations program, that we're doing good incident management, all those kind of things that you've just come to expect as travelers on our system. We want to make sure that we're able to fund those, and this budget does that. Local assistance, a big part of what we do. In fact, the second biggest part of our budget. We've talked up till now about the state highway system. It's about 10% of the roadways in the system, but it carries about 60% of the traffic. The other 40% is carried on the 90% of roads that are under the jurisdiction of locals, county, villages, towns, and cities. We want to make sure that we are also, we've heard loud and clear, especially after last winter. Looks like we might be coming into another bad winter, I hope not. But, looking after last winter, we heard loud and clear from many of the local governments around the state how stressed they were in being able to finance investments they needed to make to protect that system. And our transportation system isn't good. We can have the greatest state highway system in the world, but we talk about this last mile connection. If you can't get from your origin to our system or from your destination from our system, we won't have a robust network. So we want to make sure that we're making some investments, and some of these are details that are of particular interest to our local partners, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through them, other than to tell you we're making considerable additional investments in our local system that will total about $40 million a year, and we are doing it in a way that is focused on outcomes and that reforms those programs to have less oversight, less bureaucratic sort of, work involved in getting them delivered, and puts more of the money into actual improvement. So a variety of reforms and some changes in how those do. But basically, the takeaway is considerable additional investment in our local roads and bridges. We do a really good job at the state level of making sure that we prioritize bridge safety. At the local level, we want to make sure they have those resources to do that as well. So significant investments in both of those areas. That I think you've seen some statements come out from some of our local partners who are very happy with this budget. Public transportation, transit. A significant element of having a multimodal transportation system. There are people who who lack other mobility options to get to work, to get to their doctor appointment, to go to school, to do all the activities of daily living. Then you have other people who choose public transit as a modal choice, and they maybe have other options, but it's a modal choice that they want to make. We need to make sure that that choice is out there. We are proposing significant investments in public transit, including across-the-board increases in our operating assistance, as well as the fact that the state historically has not assisted local units of government in the capital part of public transit, buying buses, building garages, and so forth and so on. So we are adding a capital program in there so that they can help to do that. And again, we think an important component of a multimodal system. And again, as the governor has proposed in the past, and as is the case in the current second year of this current biennium, we would be funding our transit assistance investments with general purpose revenue dollars versus transportation fund dollars. But that aside, making significant additional investments. And again, on this outcomes theme, targeting those investments as much as we can to helping those systems either reduce headways or add routes that help people get to work and grow our economy. We also proposing on the transit side taking a look at whether or not the state has a role to play in incentivizing the conversion of bus fleets from diesel fuel to compressed natural gas. Many fleets around the country are doing this. It has not happened in Wisconsin, we think primarily because the systems lack the resources to make the upfront infrastructure investment in the tanks and the pumping equipment and the infrastructure to fuel vehicles with compressed natural gas. As you can see here, the systems around the country are changing because there's great cost savings to be realized. $50,000 to $80,000 over the life of a bus in fuel savings. So our thinking is this an opportunity for us to help these systems along to make this conversion if they want to make it? This would be a discretionary grant program. If they want to make that conversion, and then there would be cost savings realized on down the line. So this is a one-time idea that we would have some one-time bonding that we could use for that program. Again, we think it's an innovative idea, but again, some other states are doing it. But again, we'll see how it plays out and how much demand there potentially is for it. We wouldn't do it if the demand did not exist. We are continuing, just to talk about other modes in our proposal, we are continuing in significant investments in our freight rail infrastructure. Essentially, the state's role in freight rail has to do with areas where the Class 1 railroads, the big national railroads, just cannot economically provide the kind of service that our shippers need in the state. So we sometimes step in, purchase those lines, maintain them, have a short line railroad operate them, just to protect those shippers, make sure that they can continue to be in Wisconsin and create their products and employ people in our state. Likewise for harbors and aeronautics, continuing to make significant investments in those areas as Steve so aptly put it, if it rolls, what do you say? I'm going to remember that. If it rolls, flies, or floats, we have something to do with it. So I'm going to remember that. So again, to the part of which has received a lot of attention, how are we really going to pay for this? As we looked at putting a revenue plan together, I just want you to remember that we kept three themes in mind: adequacy, sustainability, and equity. Raise enough money, raise it in a way that it will be sustainable for the future and we won't be back here doing this problem again, and raise it in a way that is reasonably fair and spreads the burden across the users who are receiving benefits from the system. So we did propose about $751 million over the biennium, so that's a 2-year number, of tax and fee changes, essentially which come down to two big items, a highway use fee, which I'll talk about in a second, some changes in the motor fuel tax. Again, the motor fuel tax still viable, still the biggest source of revenue that we have. We are going to sort of broaden the base a little bit, but nonetheless, very hard to put a package like this together without some reliance on fuel taxes. These other items are fairly minor, and I know time is of the essence here. I do want to touch on the hybrid electric vehicle fee, though, in a second, because there's been so much public interest in that. Again, the highway use fee, the theory here being you purchase a vehicle in Wisconsin, a new vehicle, you place it into our fleet, you're going to operate it for a period of years in our state, you're paying a fee up front to put that vehicle onto the highway system. Typically, most new vehicle purchases are obviously financed, so we really look at this as a kind of an amortizable cost for the purchaser of the vehicle. Again, so amounts to, as you say there, for that size of a vehicle. I've never personally bought a $32,000 vehicle, but maybe someday. But amortized over the life of the vehicle. I would say a somewhat manageable expense, but nonetheless a significant part of the program that we're looking at. Again, maintain this user fee component. User pays to use our system. We are proposing some changes in the motor fuel tax. Essentially, what the bottom line of that amounts to roughly a 5-cent increase in gas taxes and a 10-cent increase in diesel fuel taxes. We have not had, next year will be the 9th year since we have had an increase in the motor fuel tax in Wisconsin. The last one was in 2006. We are talking about making a change in how that tax is calculated. It will be transparent to the end purchaser at the retail level, but we would propose, rather than having a flat excise tax, to have an excise tax that consists of a flat fixed component as well as a component that is tied to the wholesale price of fuel. But it amounts to, again, the 5-cent and 10-cent per gallon increase. Why a differential tax for diesel? Other states do have it. We've never had it. Other states have it. The federal government has it. They charge, the federal gas tax is 6 cents higher for diesel than it is for gasoline. If you think about the rest of this program, we have no increases in heavy truck registration fees. The highway use fee applies only to automobiles and light trucks. So again, we want all system users to participate in some way and have some skin in the game here. That's what the diesel differential does. It makes sure, and much of that diesel differential is paid by out-of-state trucking firms under a complicated thing called IFTA, Interstate Fuel Tax Agreement, and I won't get into that, but essentially we want to make sure, again, on this equity principle, that everybody is paying some, and certainly heavy trucks are users of our system. They're, they do cause wear and on our roadways and bridges. We want them to pay some, to have some skin in the game, if you will. They are not in the other parts of the revenue package, so this gives them some involvement in the process. Okay, the hybrid electric vehicle fee. We want the fuel tax is our biggest source of revenue. We want it to stay viable for the future. And as we see more vehicles entering the fleet, this is less than 1% of the revenue we're raising, by the way. But so it's not a lot of money, but it is, it's the print, as my parents used to say, it's the principle of the thing. We want to keep the gas tax viable. And when you have an increasing number of vehicles in the fleet that get extremely good fuel economy or do not burn gasoline at all as a result of the fact that they are not constantly running on an internal combustion engine that's paying fuel taxes all the time, we want them to participate in some way and make sure that they have some involvement here. The way we base this fee, essentially, it's not a penalty. It's not supposed to be punitive. What we did was we took two similar vehicles. We took a gas-powered Ford Fusion, coincidentally we picked a mid-size sedan, a gas-powered Ford Fusion compared to a hybrid Ford Fusion. They make Ford Fusions in a hybrid and a gas version, and figured out typical driver who drives a typical number of miles a year, how much more is the guy that drives the gas-powered one, how much more is he paying in fuel taxes? Just in fuel taxes, not in fuel costs, just in the taxes. How much more is he paying in fuel taxes compared to the guy in the hybrid? It's about $50 a year. And that's where we came up with the $50. So the hybrid owner asks me, well, I drive a hybrid car. You're taking away all my incentive to do a good thing. No, we're not. We're not. You're still realizing all the benefits from the actual fuel purchase that you're not making, that the money that you're saving on the fuel. It's just that tax differential that we're asking you to pay because, again, you're putting the same demand on our system that everybody else is. And so alternative fuel vehicles, great for our environment, great for the pocketbook of the people that own them and so forth. But again, we have a user fee-based system of transportation, and it is largely focused on this fuel tax. And it is not fair, it is inequitable for some people to not, to escape that. Essentially a credit for diesel cars so that because the diesel tax was intended for large commercial trucks. Okay. So, big numbers, 751 million here, 900 million here, whatever. What is the impact on the typical driver of these fees? Okay. So, as far as the motor fuel tax increase, about $28 a year, a little over $2 a month that the typical vehicle owner will pay in additional fuel taxes to finance this plan. Wisconsin, we have always kept track of how we compare to our neighboring states, Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, and Michigan, in terms of, what's my cost for state taxes and fees to operate on the highway system. We are the lowest right now of us and our neighboring states. This package as a whole, if you include all the components of it, moves us sort of into the middle of the pack. Definitely not the highest. And the other thing I would point out is that we're not the only guys in this boat right now. Minnesota is very seriously looking at how they're financing transportation. Michigan is doing the same. The Michigan Senate the other day voted on a fuel tax increase, approved it at the Senate level. So other states in our region are looking at these same issues. And so we are going to move up the chain a little bit, not to be the highest, but from an equity perspective, we do want to make sure we don't create an island for ourselves in terms of cost of operation. We really don't think we're doing that with this proposal. Matter of fact, we know we're not doing that with this proposal. There is a general fund component to this proposal. As I said, transit operating and capital would be financed through general fund. So that's general purpose revenues, income and sales taxes that people pay into the state. We currently get in the transportation fund under current law 1/4% of all general fund taxes paid in the state go into the transportation fund. That is current law in Wisconsin. That's about $37 million a year right now. We are proposing to increase that from 1/4% to 1%. Why? Well, we have a predominantly user fee funded transportation system, but if you think about it, there are many economic benefits from a safe and efficient multimodal transportation system that are not directly attributable to a user. You might not own a car, you might never pay a penny in gas taxes, you might not pay a penny in registration fees, but somehow your groceries got to the grocery store. Somehow, the Amazon.com box appeared magically on your front porch, not yet from a drone, right? So it probably came there on a truck. So bottom line is our whole economy, everybody in our state is benefiting from this system. So is it reasonable to say that, and I will talk about the magnitude of this in a second, but is it reasonable to say that I think transportation contributes a lot to the economic growth of our state. And how does that economic growth reflected in state tax revenues? More people work, they pay more income taxes, they buy more things, they pay more sales taxes. So what this proposal says is, let's take a penny on a dollar of that money. Let's take a penny on a dollar of that and put it back into making sure we're continuing to maintain that system at the level that it needs to be at. Is that a fair thing to do? Okay, that's what we'll be discussing. Obviously, or the legislature, governor will be discussing, but we think it makes some sense. And I will point out to you, many other states, well, I won't say many, but other states who are tackling these issues have also gone in this direction. Virginia is a classic example of actually increased their state sales tax rate, put all the money into transportation. So, there is some policy sort of consensus, I think, developing that says that, there are broader benefits here that is reasonable. Okay. Bonding and debt has been something that certainly has been talked about a lot. I know I'm running out of time here. Bottom line is we are lowering bonding by about $200 million. And in addition to that, if you think about it, your capacity to bond is based on your revenues, just like in your own family. I mean, the person that makes $100,000 a year can have a bigger mortgage than the person who makes $50,000 a year, right? Because they have more capacity to pay that back. So we're reducing bonding, but at the same time we're increasing our other revenues, which increases our capacity to support debt. So we think we're doing two positive things with regard to getting debt under control. Bottom line, what does this mean? Everybody talks about Wisconsin's problem being too narrow over a base. If you look at this chart currently, you look at these two slices of the pie, almost 80%, 79% of our revenues coming from two sources, gas taxes and registration fees. Under this proposal, we're reducing that from 79 to 70%. Okay, so we are broadening that base, which we think was important. I would draw your attention then also to the GPR component. At the end of the day, 16%, what's that? About $1 out of every 6 in our system, in our transportation, coming out of those general fund revenues. So although we are increasing it, admittedly, or proposing to increase it, still at the end of the day, this is a predominantly user fee funded system. It is a predominantly user fee funded system. Again, coming back to my 3 themes, as you can see there, adequacy, sustainability, equitability. We think we've tried to touch each of those. We think we were pretty successful, but again, it's a long road. And we'll see where things we'll see where things head. I will close, and I don't have a slide on this, but I will close on this, and then take your questions. We recognize very much that this is a difficult subject. It's one that's getting a lot more attention, but we're making a significant ask here. And we know that, and we've heard this loud and clear from our legislators, from others, that you need to show us, Wisconsin DOT, that you can be trusted to spend this money well, that you're going to be good stewards of these resources that we're going to give you. We've tried to do that by building an outcome-based budget, so that's one of the ways we're trying to do that. But, and this could be the topic of a whole other conversation, but I just want to assure you that we, through our performance improvement program, through our lean government programs, through various innovations, and I think we're becoming a national leader in innovations in how we deliver our programs, we are working every day, and I mean this sincerely, to be a transparent and accountable agency that spends your money wisely. And we will be issuing some reports in the coming weeks and months to sort of demonstrate some of the things that we've been doing, certainly over the 4 years that our current leadership team has been in place, and even going back before that, to be that kind of an agency and to earn your trust that we can spend this money responsibly. So with that, I'll close, and I'm happy to take a few questions. Yash.
Mark, my son incidentally drives a Ford Fusion hybrid, and he saves about $1,200 a year in fuel costs, so he doesn't mind paying extra $50 for registration. I think that's a good concept.
What do you do with a little TV spot for us?
So the biggest, I think, opposition you'll face on this thing, it's a great budget. I love it. You'll face probably is the 2.5% sales tax on new cars. Mm-hmm. And I think I've got a lot of opposition on that. Also, in the commission report, there were 2 other options: toll roads, right, and mileage-driven taxes or something. Did you consider?
Sure. Yash's question on tolls and so-called VMT or mileage-based system. Tolling currently prohibited by federal law, I think, as many of you know. We have received a lot of questions and interest from legislators about tolling. We have some leaders in the legislature, Speaker Voss, for example, who have a number of times expressed an interest in tolling in the future. Where we are at right now is we really don't know how we would even answer that kind of a question from the legislature about how tolling would be implemented in Wisconsin, because we've never studied it. So we are asking for a small amount of money in this budget. We're not making a proposal on tolling, but we do want to spend some money to study it so that when the time comes, if the time comes and the legislature and the governor start asking us about it, we can do that. Likewise, we can answer those questions intelligently. Likewise, on the VMT issue, so some states are sort of moving in that direction. The commission did recommend that. We have asked in this budget for authority to begin to collect data on that. So we could never implement something on that until we had mileage data, a database of miles driven built up by individual vehicle. So we're asking for the authority to modify our systems to start collecting that data as the possible first step, again, if our policymakers decided to go in that direction at some point in the future.
Secretary Gottlieb, I wanted to first thank you for all the opportunities you provided for input from the disability community in the budget. You know, so many people with disabilities can't drive because of their disability or they can't afford a car, so it's great to see the increase in transit. funding. So thanks for doing that. But I wondered if you could talk a little bit about what you see in terms of future investments in specialized transportation, like the 85-21 program. It's great there's an inflationary increase,
Yeah.
but given the demographics, and Governor Walker's been so committed to expanding family care, having more people live independently in the community, but they can't do it without transportation.
Right, yeah. Barbara, as you point out, yeah, we do have that inflationary adjustment, but again, if that's something, we're more than happy to engage with you as the process moves forward, whether it's in the governor's budget or in the legislative budget, on where that needs to be.
Thank you for your permission.
I have a question regarding, it would be public transportation. I work in the hiring for Quad Graphics,
Yep.
where you have 9 plants within 50 miles of each other. And when we left today, we were told that we could use the number of 400 full-time positions. These aren't temporary positions, these are positions that people can build careers with and benefits. And the thing that we're struggling with is we have the jobs, but we need the state's help in getting us, the people, to get out to where we need them to be. So that's the question I have. Do you have any plans to help us grow public transportation?
Right, I mean, so you hit the nail on the head. So access to jobs is the biggest part of it. And, you know, I think everybody, regardless of their political leanings, wants to give as many people as possible the opportunity to be a productive member of our society. And having mobility is a precondition to doing that. So we think, you know, with some of the programs that we're putting in place here, we are going to intend to put programs in place that will target just those kind of investments of moving people to work. And I'll just give you an example. So, and I'm probably not the best example for me to give because it resulted from actually a lawsuit. But so we were a party to a lawsuit with regard to the environmental document on the zoo interchange. The end result of that was an agreement on the part of the department to invest $13 million, Mike, or $13 million in transit investments, and one of those has been the creation of new routes from the central area of Milwaukee out to Industrial Park in New Berlin. And my understanding from what I'm being told is that has been a very successful use of that money. So, you know, I think this budget builds on that. I really do.
Mary Thomas with MetroGo. I wanted to thank you. Very courageous budget. This is a big historic conversation. So you like Barbara said, been great about the public input and taking that to heart. On the public transit side, I did want to ask a question, kind of building on what Jeff just commented on. The funds that come in those 2-year budgets, when you put transit in place for workforce, it needs to be consistent and sustainable. Is there an idea of how that can be maintained when it's out of the general fund versus something you have a little more control of?
You know, transit was never a continuing appropriation, even when it was in the transportation fund. It was a biennial, actually an annual appropriation. So that I don't see that really changing in terms of you know, the legislature on a biannual basis having to, you know, think about those investments. And I see your point, though, and we've struggled with this a little bit as we talk about this program for the job access is, again, you're creating some opportunity for a system to create a route or whatever. How do they know that that's good? The dollars are going to be there to continue that? And I acknowledge that that's something that we will have to come to grips with. Yeah.
At the beginning of your presentation, you alluded to some potential backlash about the hybrid electric vehicle registration fee. Has there been any exploration of treating hybrids and electrics differently, recognizing that hybrids are simply on one end of a spectrum of fuel efficiency, whereas electric vehicles get no fuel efficiency because they don't use fuel at all?
You raise a valid point, and that's something that I think could certainly be a valid point in discussion. There is a fundamental difference. Your Nissan Leaf or your Chevy Volt never goes to the gas station. Well, I guess the Volt has a backup generator motor, but electric cars typically don't go to the gas station. Whereas a hybrid vehicle, some people would argue, is just a much more fuel-efficient version of a gas vehicle. Again, a legitimate point, but again, we looked at it in terms of here's two vehicles that are like Yash with his son. I mean, the same vehicle with a different system of propulsion, and that one system of propulsion results in much less fee being paid to use our system. And so how do we capture that? But, and people have made the argument, well, hey, I can buy a gas car that gets, 40 miles per gallon. Yes, you can, but there's not, this is, I think, a slightly different situation in the sense that you got, again, equivalent vehicles that have different types of propulsion systems on them. But again, no system is perfect, is ever going to perfectly, I guess you're never going to develop a system that perfectly captures user cost unless you go to, this sort of GPS-based vehicle miles traveled, where the device is in your car and it turns on and turns off and measures your vehicles and sends you a bill, and we're probably a ways away from that. Well, yeah, last question, please.
You mentioned that you had a long-term strategic plan. Are you able to just quickly state what the DOT's vision is for Wisconsin in, say, 10 years or whatever is part of your planning?
We have a long-range multimodal plan, which is called Connections 2030, and I would put it first in terms of our mission statement, which is provide leadership in the development and operation of a safe and efficient transportation system. So we are, within the construction of what the legislature gives us and how they apportion the money, trying to make sure that we have a safe and efficient multimodal system that meets our 5 core goals. Providing mobility for the public and modal choice and making sure the system is operated efficiently so people can get from here to there. Accountability, making sure that we are accountable to the public in terms of delivering on budget, delivering on time, efficient management and use of our natural resources. Preservation, that we're doing what we need to do to preserve the system and protect that asset that's been sort of handed down to us from previous generations that built it. Our 4th core goal is safety. And again, I know we're running over time here, but so we've done a lot with regard to traffic safety. Mike has been a real leader in the agency on that. It's been a passion for him. Knock on plexiglass. In 2014, we are going to have the first year since 1943 in Wisconsin where we've had less than 500 traffic fatalities. That's an incredible accomplishment. So safety, and then last, service, providing a higher level of service to the public is our core goal, and we could have a whole other meeting and talk about some of the things that we're doing with regard to doing more with the same number of people through technology and through making more services available to people on the internet and so forth and so on. But I would put it in terms of those 5 core goals of mobility, accountability, preservation, safety, and service.
Well,
thank you very much.
Again, we appreciate the Secretary being here, being open to your questions and being able to explain his vision and the department's vision. But we also, again, really want to appreciate you for the responsiveness you've always shown to MMAC and our members' priorities. We are the heartbeat of Wisconsin's economy here in Metro Milwaukee, and as you saw through the numbers, the mega projects that are sucking up the vast majority of the transportation dollars in this state are ones right here in Milwaukee. That doesn't make us the most popular girl at the dance outstate with a lot of legislators, but we have a department, we have a governor who recognizes the importance of those arteries to the circulatory system of a statewide economy and have made investments appropriately, even at considerable political hazard. And so we really appreciate that. So thank you again, Secretary, and thank all of you for coming. I hope this has been of value to you, and I hope we see you here again as we have more of these in the future.